What's good everyone, Jake here with Venture Visuals, and today I am going to show you the fundamentals of rotoscoping inside of After Effects. Think green screen without using a green screen. Rotoscoping is the art of tracing out an element such as a person or shape using the Rotobrush tool. Once traced, you can then place that object or person onto a separate background and apply individual effects to your rotoscope. Additionally, once you have separate layers of the same scene, you can start to manipulate things like the background and other objects within the scene. In my opinion, the Rotobrush tool is one of the most powerful tools within the After Effects software, and there truly is an infinite amount of possibilities when it comes to using the Rotobrush tool. I just want to give a quick shout out to everybody who has been buying my packs, liking, commenting, and subscribing on the channel. This community has grown to almost 10,000 subscribers, and meeting so many of you guys through this channel has just been an absolute blessing. I've been working on some updates for the packs on my website, as well as some new packs coming out, so make sure you stay tuned for that. I'm excited to show you guys what I've been cooking up. I also want to mention that you can reach me on Instagram if you have any questions at all, or if you just need some help with your own video edits, just let me know. I'm always looking to collaborate on more projects such as music videos, hype edits, sport edits, whatever it is. If you're excited to learn more about the magic of rotoscoping and the Rotobrush, make sure to hit the like button down below and let's jump in. When you're rotoscoping in After Effects, the Rotobrush tool uses artificial intelligence to track our subject's movement and cut down on time it would take us to mask each frame individually. When you begin to rotoscope a subject, you will see the software propagate or develop more frames as you move down your timeline. Once you've rotoscoped an object within the After Effects software, you can then move it as an independent layer and manipulate it with different effects. Plenty of video editors begin their projects within Premiere Pro. If you attempt to take your footage from Premiere directly into After Effects and start rotoscoping, be aware that you may have frame rate issues that pop up. You want to make sure that you nest the clip you're going to rotoscope in Premiere Pro first, so that it locks in your sequence frame rate from Premiere Pro and not your actual clip frame rate. Plenty of videographers will shoot their videos in 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second for slow motion capabilities. However, once you jump into your video editing software, you should typically edit in 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. For example, if we have a clip that's shot in 60 frames per second, but we drop it into a 24 frame per second timeline and we nest that clip, we are able to then rotoscope just 24 frames per second rather than 60 frames per second, which would take twice as long. Anytime you nest your clip, you're going to lock in the frame rate of that timeline. After you nest your clip, all you have to do is right click and hit replace with After Effects composition. Remember to choose your starting frame wisely. The more precise and stable the frame is, the better the propagation will be. Set your Rotobrush size holding Command on Mac or Control on PC and then dragging with your cursor. In the settings, you want to make sure that your Rotobrush version is set to 2.0 and the quality is set to best. Ensure that your working resolution is set to full. Begin to trace your subject starting in the middle of your subject rather than the outline. This gives the artificial intelligence within the Rotobrush more space to guess the area that you want traced. From here, you want to change a few settings under your Rotobrush properties. The search radius is used to help After Effects determine the search area when looking for pixels that match from one frame to the next. I usually just leave this value at the default. Enabling classic controls will allow you to have more control of the finer edge details. Edge detection will enable you to choose between balanced, which will calculate all frames equally based on the surrounding frames, or favor predicted edges, which is very helpful when rotoscoping objects with colors that match the background. Once you've traced the first frame, which is also called our base frame, you can then hit the spacebar and After Effects will attempt to rotoscope the rest of the frames automatically. However, you want to be careful because sometimes it will trace areas you don't want traced. I prefer to just go frame by frame, hitting the numbers 1 and 2 on my keyboard and observing the rotoscope to make sure I'm not tracing any unwanted areas. If you see the Rotobrush tracing areas you don't want to use, hold Alt-I option and click and drag over areas you don't want traced. You can refine the edges of your rotoscope using the reduce chatter property. Increase this property to reduce erratic changes to edges from one frame to the next. The use motion blur option should be checked if the object you're tracing has a fair amount of movement. Check this option to render the rotoscope with motion blur. The high quality option is slower, but it generates a cleaner edge, and if you're like me, you can definitely wait for the better results. Use decontaminate edge colors to decontaminate or clean the color of edge pixels around your rotoscope. I usually turn this option on. You can also use the refine edge tool for refining highly detailed edges like hair. To do this, click and hold the Rotobrush icon until you see a drop-down menu with the refine edge tool. Once you're finished tracing those fine edges, you'll see the grayed out area in your Rotobrush effect controls turn on. Now you can control the refine edge settings from your Rotobrush effect controls. There are also several ways in which you can observe your rotoscope as you move through the process. Using some of our layer panel view options, we can cycle through different appearances of our rotoscope layer by toggling alpha, alpha boundary, or alpha overlay, which you can actually change the color of using this button here. Once you've traced out your object as good as you can get it throughout your entire timeline, hit the freeze button. This will allow us to make adjustments and add effects to our layer without After Effects repropagating our entire rotoscope and wasting more time. If you find that you need to make more changes to your rotoscope, simply unfreeze your layer and start rotoscoping again. So now that you guys have a basic understanding of what the Rotobrush tool is and how it can be used in After Effects, we're actually going to dive in and do a few effects of our own using the Rotobrush tool. For this first effect, we're going to be creating this super trendy clone look using this first example. So what I'm going to do first is right click on this first example and I'm going to hit nest to lock in our frame rate. The next thing I'm going to do is right click on it again and hit replace with After Effects composition. This will automatically open up our clip within the After Effects software. The first thing I'm going to do is click on our layer and hit Command D to duplicate it. Now I'm going to hit enter and call this top layer Roto. Bottom layer, we can call this one background. Now with my top layer selected, what I'm going to do is come up here to my Rotobrush tool and start to trace out our subject. Now that we have the artist traced out of the background and fully rotoscoped, what I'm going to do is hit V on my keyboard to change back to my cursor. And instead of having the layer roto selected, we're going to switch back to our composition. Now, the easiest way to create a clone look using rotoscopes is by duplicating our rotoscope layer by hitting Command D. And then what we can do is slide these layers around. This is going to give us a very basic clone look here, and you can see that it's pretty trippy, pretty cool looking, and very easy to create. Now, say you want to add a little movement to one of your rotoscope layers, or maybe a bunch of your rotoscope layers. All you have to do is click on the layer that you want to start moving around. You can hit this little drop down arrow here, and you can make keyframes under position, scale, and rotation. So let's just do that. We made some keyframes there on our first frame. Now let's come a little bit farther down the timeline, and let's just change the position value. So let's have this clone move over here on the right side. And just for fun, we can shrink him down a little bit. So he's kind of in the background. And we can also change his rotation just so that you guys get the point. So now as I scroll back here, you can see how that clone moves across the screen. If I want to add a little bit of motion blur to this clone, all I have to do is toggle my switches and modes here at the bottom until we see this motion blur column. And all I'm going to do is turn this motion blur on. Now you can see as our clone layer moves across the screen, he's got more blur, which makes it look a little bit more natural. Another really cool clone look I've been seeing in a lot of music videos is kind of this clone trail look that you get off of a central artist or figure. So in order to create this, let's go ahead and delete our first two rotoscopes here. Now what I'm going to do with our original rotoscope layer selected, I'm going to come up here to effects and presets and type in an effect called echo. I'm going to throw this onto our rotoscope layer, and we're going to change a few settings under the effect controls. The first thing I'm going to change is the number of echoes. Let's turn this up to 7. Let's now change the starting intensity to a value like 0.9, and then let's change the decay to a value like 0.8. Now in order to get this looking nice, we're going to change the echo operator from add to composite in front. And now we can see that our rotoscope has these clone trails coming off of him. Now it's going to be up to you, personal preference, how you tweak these settings. Now all I have to do with this is hit Command S and it will save right back into Premiere Pro. Granted, when you're saving a rotoscope file back into Premiere Pro, you're probably going to end up with one of these red lines on your timeline. So what you want to do is come to the left and hit I, come to the right and hit O, and then come up here to sequence and render into out so that it plays back at full speed. And now we can view the effect in full motion directly in Premiere Pro. For this next effect, we're going to be creating the super trippy warped background look using some presets. So what I'm going to do is nest this clip, and we're going to bring it into After Effects and rotoscope this clip as well. Now that I've traced the artist separate from the background, I'm gonna hop back into my composition, and you can see it's on a transparent layer. So this is another thing you gotta remember when you're rotoscoping. If you didn't duplicate the original clip in the beginning and you rotoscope a subject out, you're not gonna see the background anymore. If you wanna manipulate the background in any way, you wanna make sure you have a background layer. So I'm just gonna duplicate this rotoscope layer and delete the Rotobrush off the bottom layer. And again, I can rename this layer Roto and this bottom layer Background. To create this warped background look, all I'm gonna do is drop down this animation presets folder and scroll to where I have a folder called Use for HD 1920 by 1080. Now this folder is a part of Brian Delamata's Liquid Explosion pack, and I've found it very useful for these type of warp background effects. In order for these presets to work, I'm actually going to duplicate my background layer again. So we have this middle layer here. I'll rename it to middle. From here, all I have to do is click and drag any of these presets and drop them onto this middle layer to get this super crazy warped background look. And because we rotoscoped our artist out in the beginning, he's separate from this big blob, this warp, whatever you want to call it, in the background. So as I play it back here, you can kind of get the feel for what this effect is looking like. It's pretty cool already. It might just take adjusting a few keyframes to get the timing right. If I want to mess around with some other presets, all I have to do is hit Command Z to undo that preset. Let's take this one called Water Waves. Let's drag this onto our middle layer as well, and let's see what that does. So as I play this Water Waves preset back, you can see it gives us a really trippy, almost underwater type of look and feel. Let's try one more of these presets and see what we end up with. So I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo our last preset. I'm going to try this one called Trip City. So let's take that one and drag it onto our middle layer here. And now you can see it just looks crazy. Now guys, just because I'm clicking and dragging these presets onto my clips doesn't mean you can't customize them further. For example, if you want to change the color of this specific preset, we can change the color balance HLS setting here in my effect controls to get an entirely new color, an entirely new look, and it's just gonna look sick. So we can blend it with his jacket a little bit right there and get that purpley look for this scene. And now when I play it back, it's gonna look really cool. So check that out. Looks awesome. You get that warpy background look that kind of just comes in to his rotoscope, and it just looks really dope. If I want to add another one onto the end of this, all I have to do is hit Command Shift D on our middle layer to duplicate it. I'm going to go ahead and delete the preset off of this new layer. And now I'm excited to try this preset called Liquid Blob. So let's click and drag that onto our new middle layer here. And you can see it's already impacting our scene. So let's check out what this looks like in full speed with both of these presets used on the background. So as it plays back at full speed here with both those presets, you can see the first preset kind of sucks in, and then the second preset kind of makes the colors explode out. It's really cool, and it's a really easy way to make your edits pop within seconds. Shout out to Brian Delamata for making this pack. If you guys are interested in downloading these presets, I'll make sure to include a link to this pack down below as well, so you can get a similar look on your own videos. This next rotoscope effect is super legit. It's one of my favorite ways to transition from one clip to the next, and that is by creating our own background slide transitions. In Premiere Pro, we have two clips back to back from the same music video. During this first clip, we have to decide when we want the background to start sliding out of the frame separate from the artist. So let's just find a point here, maybe like right about there before the end of the clip. So let's just make a cut at that moment. Now what I'm going to do is click and drag this first clip up above and either extend this second clip underneath or just slide it over. From here, we're going to right click on our top clip and hit Nest, hit OK, and then we're going to bring it into After Effects. Here in After Effects, I'm going to duplicate our layer twice. We're going to name this one Background and rename this top one Roto, and we're going to begin the rotoscoping process. So I'm going to click on my Rotobrush tool and get back to business. Now that I've completed my rotoscope cutout, what I'm gonna do is switch back to my composition. I'm going to shift click on both of my layers and hit P to open up our position properties. What I'm going to do from here is just to create a keyframe right on the default value at this very first frame. Now let's take our scrubber and move significantly farther down our timeline. At this point, what I'm going to do is select our background layer. We're going to change the position value so it falls below out of the frame. With our rotoscope position, I'm going to make him slide to the right. Once we've positioned both our rotoscope and our background out of the frame, you wanna make sure that you toggle your transparency grid. So we're gonna toggle our transparency grid on there instead of having a black background. This is just so that the next clip is going to be revealed underneath. Remember, because we stacked these clips on top of each other within Premiere Pro. The next thing I'm going to do is just turn on motion blur for both of these layers. I'm going to shift click both of these beginning keyframes and I'm going to right click on them, go to keyframe assistant and hit easy ease out. This will help smoothen up our animation a little bit and give this transition a more fluid feel. Now, if I play this back in After Effects, you can see it's a very quick transition, but you get the point. The background slides out of the frame and the artist goes another direction. All I'm gonna do from here is hit Command S to save this back into Premiere Pro, come back here into Premiere Pro, and again, we're faced with this red line, so I'm just going to render this sequence of clips. Now, if we play this back at full speed, you can see a really cool transition happening here. And I like to call these background slide transitions because the background slides out of the way. I actually have a whole tutorial dedicated to doing these types of transitions if you want to check it out. This next rotoscope technique is becoming more and more popular with car edits, sports edits, and music videos. What we're doing is tracing out our subject using the Rotobrush, and we're replacing that shape with a different type of background. So it's gonna look really trippy. I'm just gonna take the next clip down here in our timeline and do our rotoscope. Now that our rotoscope layer is traced out, I'm gonna hop back here into our composition. I'm going to duplicate our rotoscope layer, and again, I'm going to create our background layer so the background layer remains. Now what you wanna do is find an overlay or some type of really cool footage that you want to fill your rotoscope with. So for me, I thought filling it with a fire burst from Cinepac's Fire Effects pack would be really cool. And I'm going to drag it below the rotoscope layer. Now by toggling my switches and modes, I get this option for a track matte. What I'm gonna do with our Fireburst layer selected is change our track matte to Alpha Matte Nested Sequence 10, which is going to be our rotoscope layer. Now you can see that we have this fire effects going into our rotoscope and it's not impacting the background or anything else around it. And we're getting this really cool look. If I wanna make this look a little bit cooler, what I can do is duplicate our rotoscope layer, turn it on so that we can see it, and I'm going to change the position. So here in the beginning, I'm going to hit P, I'm going to make a keyframe there under position, I'm going to slide him to the left a little bit so it reveals this layer that we filled with fire underneath. He's going to stay on the left side for a little bit, and then he's going to slide back to his original shape. So to do that, we're just gonna copy paste this first default keyframe. And now if I play this back, you can see the cool effect that we're starting to get. Now the only thing I want to do to kind of smooth this out is again turn my motion blur on, highlight all my motion keyframes we just made. I'm going to right click on one and change them all to easy ease. And now as it plays back at full speed, you can see the end result. So again, very creative way to use rotoscoping and track mattes to get this type of look. It's very trippy, it's very creative. This next Rotobrush technique is very important to learn, and it's just an easy way to do zoom through transitions through objects within your scene. For this example, we're going to be zooming through this windshield here into the very next scene, and it's gonna look really sick. Now here in Premiere Pro, because we're zooming in to the next scene, we're going to click and drag this layer above onto video layer 2, and we're going to click and drag our next clip out underneath. Now what I'm going to do is cut right where our second clip is going to begin and our transition is going to start as well. Now with the second half of this first clip, I'm going to right click on it, nest it just like how we've been doing, and then I'm going to bring it into After Effects. For this example, we're going to rotoscope the windshield. So that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm just gonna start rotoscoping around this windshield. And now you wanna remember that this effect is going to be really hard if there's a lot of blur or if there's a lot of movement in your scene. Now that I'm done rotoscoping out the windshield, what I'm going to do is come over under our Rotobrush in Refine Edge Effect Controls, and we're going to select Invert Foreground and Background. Now when we hop into composition, our rotoscope will be transparent, but the rest of the background will remain. Now you want to add the zoom through movement. So what I'm going to do is open up our windshield transform properties, and I'm going to create keyframes here on the very beginning for position and scale. And I'm going to come all the way close to the end here. I'm going to scale in and move the position until our screen is fully filled with our transparent windshield. So boom, just like that. In order to make this look as natural as possible, I'm going to turn my motion blur on. That way, once we start the zoom, as you can see, the rest of the background starts to get blurry. This is just gonna help sell the transition a little bit more. Now, what I'm gonna do to make this a little bit more gradual as well is highlight both these beginning keyframes and hit easy ease out. In the last step I'm going to do to make sure that this windshield doesn't just disappear out of nowhere is just gonna be duplicating our windshield layer, turning off the invert foreground and background so our windshield is back, and then we're going to keyframe the opacity of this top layer. So let's just take the opacity from 100 and maybe 7 frames in, it goes down to 0. So boom, you can see it changes gradually there to 0 instead of it just snapping to transparent right away. And now if we play this back at full speed, you can see we're zooming into a transparent windshield. Obviously the motion isn't perfect. You're gonna wanna play around with your keyframes to get the scale and position as fluid as you possibly can. If you're gonna attempt this effect, it's always gonna be easier to use some stable footage. So what I'm gonna do now is just hit Command S and save this back into Premiere Pro. And now because we have it set on top of our next clip, when we zoom through that transparent windshield, you can see right there, the next clip starts to come through. So you can see here as we play it back at full speed, boom, just zooming in straight through that windshield. Obviously the motion doesn't help it look that smooth, but it definitely looks cool. And it's just a nice, easy, subtle way to transition from one clip to the next. This last rotoscope effect is really cool, and I've really enjoyed using this combination of effects and plugins on some of my more recent music videos. So what we're gonna be doing for this effect is combining some rotoscoping with some Saber plugin, and it's gonna give us this really cool kind of glowing outline around what we trace out. So here on my Premiere Pro timeline, we got some shoes shot in 120 frames per second. That's why it's so slow motion there. All I'm gonna do is right click and hit nest, hit OK, bring this into After Effects. In After Effects, I'm going to duplicate this layer, and with our top layer selected, I'm actually just going to start tracing out the shoes in this scene here. Now what I'm going to do is come back to our composition, and now with our shoe layer selected that we just rotoscoped, what I'm going to do is come up here to layer and select auto trace. Now you want to make sure that it's switched to work area and not just current frame. And then you want to make sure that it also has selected apply to new layer. Then I'm just going to hit OK. I'm going to wait a second for After Effects to auto trace what we just rotoscoped. Once it's done auto tracing, you'll see on our screen here that we now have this white color over top of our rotoscope layer. And that is our new layer called auto traced shoe. What I'm going to do is click and drag this new auto trace layer below our shoe layer. Come over here to effects and presets and type in Saber. This is a free plugin by Video Copilot. I'm just going to click and drag this onto our auto trace layer. It doesn't snap to our outline right away. So what you want to do is drop down your customized core and change your core type from Saber to layer masks. Now what you need to do for the rest of the clip to show through is drop your render settings down. Under composite settings, you're going to change it from black to transparent. Now what I can do is just click any of these presets built into the Saber plugin, and it's going to give us different glowing lines. You can then find one that you like, and then you can tweak the settings of that glowing line around your auto trace subject. I really like this preset called Protocol. It's not too flashy, it's not too over the top, but it's enough so that you'll notice it. And as I play it back at full speed, granted the lines are not perfect, but it still looks really sick. And if you're just plopping these types of effects around in maybe half-second clips on your music video, maybe you have a ton of cuts and you start throwing in effects like this, people are probably not going to notice some of those imperfections. So don't be too hard on yourself. This is a very drawn out clip here, so it's a little bit easier to notice some of those imperfections within the outline of the shoes itself, but it still looks super, super sick. So you just saw me go through the basics of what you can do with rotoscoping. Now it's your turn to go out and start experimenting with this awesome tool. The possibilities that you can create using the Rotobrush tool are truly limitless. You can go for hours creating and finding new ways to use the Rotobrush tool. I think it's one of After Effects' most powerful tools built into the software. And we're probably going to see rotoscoping become an even bigger trend in video effects as the years go on. If you're a video editor who's looking to add some sauce to your next edit today, definitely consider checking out my website, venturvisuals.com. I have overlays, light leaks, title templates, transition presets, and more on there, all of which you can try completely for free when you download the free pack. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check the links out down below in the description. If you found this tutorial helpful or have any questions at all, make sure to leave a comment for me down below or just hit me up on Instagram at venturvisuals. I really appreciate you guys for watching this video, and until next time, I'm Jake Venner. Peace out.